Next, I'd like to talk to you about drawing animals that have some color in them. You may not always want to be working black and white, so let's look at what our options are with that. And if you want to work from photographs of animals, that's fine. In lieu of a live animal that I'm actually observing, I'm going to use a specimen that I collected and preserved. So a monarch butterfly that is definitely colorful. The first thing I want to do is to just get a gestural sketch of the animal, and why I prefer working from an actual animal or object is because photography is an intermediary and it flattens depth, so it's not the same working from a live object versus a photograph of that object. And also the photographer had their own artistic input into how they cropped the photo and their white balance and focal point and all of that. Okay, so if I look at this monarch's wings, I'm going to do just very loose, and I'm just diving into pen. No, not going with pencil first on this. Now this is preserved, and butterflies are, you've really got to put them in an envelope or in between vinyl like I have here. Vinyl's good because then you can still see it and it preserves it. They're very, very fragile. Okay, now I'm choosing to work with my Faber-Castell pen again versus the Tombow because I know that I'm going to add color to this, and I'm going to use some water media. So you have to plan ahead depending on what kind of color materials you're going to use. So I like to work with pen so that you can see more clearly on the camera what I'm doing. And some insects are just, the detail in the wings is magnificent. Honest to goodness, I once at the beach had a dragonfly land on my elbow, and I held my elbow, I kid you not. Actually, it was on my left one, thank goodness. It was up on my elbow, and I held my elbow there for about 45 minutes drawing it. And it as a sketch, it came out well, but when you compared it to the animal, not even close in terms of beauty. So nature's always going to outdo you. You can't be equal to nature in beauty, but you can create a different type of beauty with your art. I'm not competing with nature. I'm using nature as a jumping off point for my ideas. And I am paying attention to the marks, of course, to draw them, but I'm not rigidly paying attention to them. So maybe this section could have been a little different proportion, but it's so organic that I'm trying to get a sense just for the overall look of the animal. Now, if I were doing like a scientific illustration that was very tight, more about contour line drawing, that's a different matter. So it depends on what kind of drawing you're doing. But when you're working out in nature, you're going to more than likely want to keep it loose and fast. There's a lot of elements that happen working outside, the change in light, changing weather, or maybe a rainstorm comes up out of the blue and you've got to pack up quickly, or it's dusk and mosquitoes are biting you. So usually in terms of sketching, I'm working pretty quickly. Now, obviously, this butterfly is dead, so it doesn't have the vibrancy of a living animal. So I wouldn't say that it's exactly catching what the living monarch is like. Butterflies that are alive, they're flitting around, and you have to work really fast to draw butterflies. If you like butterflies and you want to draw them, actually I have work up in Mission, Texas at the National Butterfly Center right now. Sometime down the road, I would recommend a trip there, the Butterfly Gardens. I've never seen so many butterflies in my entire life. It's really phenomenal. In all different colors. It's just sheer magic. And there's a state park close by that is very well known among birders. Mission, Texas. Okay, so I've caught the form of my butterfly, and now I'm going to add some color. So just in terms of butterfly species, I did learn from my work down at Mission that, you know, the edges, just like with leaves, the edges of the wing are important for identification purposes. So butterflies do fade over time. Animals that are dead, their pigmentation slowly fades. So this would have been a much more vibrant orange than it is now. So I'm going to use my color pencils, and I have, these are all, well, I have one Faber-Castell watercolor pencil. The other two are Caran d'Ache. So I know that I can put water on top of this. The black lines won't bleed. And I'm going to start off with this nice medium yellow. And jaune, well, it's Swiss, so the French for yellow. Watercolor pencils, you don't have, I find, as much variety as you do with regular color pencils. So sometimes to get the color that you want, you have to layer colors. I'm going to start with the yellow, but then I'm going to add other colors. And I could just leave it like this. I could just leave it as colored pencil. So you can just add color with just colored pencils, not watercolor pencils. They look very similar until you add water, and then they're not similar at all. Traditional colored pencils tend to be a bit more vibrant than watercolor pencils. The binder is different. Binder is wax in traditional color pencils, and the binder in watercolor pencils is gum arabic, which is what binds watercolors. And now I'm going to add I'm not going to use a lot of pressure. This is pale Geranium Lake. Okay. So I'm just gonna go over it just a little bit, and you can change the direction that you layer to get a bit more coverage. And I'm also thinking of, well, when it was alive, it would have been more of a vibrant orange versus faded yellow anyway. You get a little sense right here where the wing folded under, and there's a touch of vibrancy there. And then I'm going to go in with this russet sienna brown. You hear the same colors called different things by different manufacturers. And let's see, I think I'll use not the Tombow. Don't want to do that. I think I'm just going to use my Faber-Castell and to go in here. That's going to use a lot of ink. I'm going to use my ink pen. I don't want to go through too much of my pit pen. So you have to figure out how to conserve your art supplies, especially when you want to lay down a lot of black. That maybe your Pigma pens, your Faber-Castell pit pens are not the best route to go. Or if you have some, if you don't have one of these pens, you can just use the Higgins Black Magic ink with a round brush. That'll work. I'm leaving some of the white, the ground. We call that the ground of the paper. Visible because the insect has white areas on it. Okay. Tilt this a little more. So, see it a little better. That's better. Okay, so now I'm going to come in with my water pen, and I'm going to add some water to this. But even with it being color pencil, it's still effective. I'm going to do this flat, just in case, and in case it drips. Here, I'll hold it up as I do it. But I'm going to hold it at a tilt. Notice my black lines are not bleeding. So I use the right pen for that. Now the black ink, it bleeds a little bit. Nothing like the Tombow, but it does bleed a little bit. So you might want to wait for the India ink and the brush pen to dry a bit before you do that. Okay, there we go. We've got my color butterfly done. So you can see how that looks, adding just a touch of color to your sketch. So I'm going to show you another way to add color to a drawing. I'm just going to use this scrap piece, draw my butterfly facing a different direction. I'm using the Pitt pen, and I'm going to add color using, instead of markers, or rather pencils, I'm going to use markers. So again, a quick gestural drawing. And I move my eyes back and forth from the butterfly just the same way we did with the other objects, back and forth, back and forth. I'm looking at the object in my paper, the object in my paper, moving my hand simultaneously. And you just have to practice and train your eyes and your hands to work together. And that'll happen, but you have to practice. And the veining on the leaves is, it's like these elongated and distorted wedges. They're rectangular, definitely camouflage. You know, they're good for hiding the butterfly from birds. You know, just like giraffes have similar patterning, and helps them in the forest to look less obvious when they're in the forest. Of course, they stand out a lot on the savannah, right? Okay, so sometimes you got to think about where the position of your hand is as you finish a sketch. Okay, so I know I want to add color here, so I'm not going to go in right now and put black ink here, because working on this easel the way I am, there's a chance that I will smear it. Okay, so you got to sort of plan ahead with that kind of thing. And a lot of that comes from experience, having smeared drawings. So the thing about markers is that they don't blend in terms of continuous tone the way colored pencils do, and they don't, unless they're water soluble, they don't dissolve the way watercolor pencils do. And I'm using a Pitt pen that it's the basic set. These are not water soluble. And I'm going to go ahead and fill the color in pretty completely. Markers tend to show strokes, so if you keep your strokes parallel, unless you want to hatch, the strokes will show. But I'm also not asking you to stay within the lines and fill things in, because that, you just have to find a comfortable place for how you want to work, where it defines the form but doesn't become too rigid. And that's going to take some practice. Now notice I don't fill that all the way in. I'm seeing some light come through the wings, and I'm leaving that open to just give a sense for that being a wider area. Now I don't need much more than that. I do have another marker. It's a Stabilo that's ochre, a brownish yellow. When I teach kids, they say ochre. Ooh, yes, I want to use some more ochre. But I have a penchant for okra. Well, I like okra too, especially pickled. But ochre, it works so well with yellows and oranges. It just adds shading, but in a warm way with those colors. And I really like this pen. It's an excellent variety of ochre. I'm just not overdoing it, just a few strokes here and there. I need to add black there. I left that off, but I'm getting to it. Okay. So now I'm going to come in with my brush pen again and add the black. So I just added a touch of color to this. I didn't go overboard. You know, I didn't do a ton of layering. You know, it can get too busy fast and lose the spontaneity and just sense of looseness that I think sketching should really imply. And you can do a sustained drawing later in your studio space. But when you're doing things like this on the fly, you've just got to be able to work pretty quickly. And I think I need to add a little more color here. So as you work, you'll see places where you need to go back and adjust. Okay, so here we have the butterfly now done in marker. And let me go back to my butterfly that I did in watercolor pencils. And we can just compare the two. A little there. Okay, so I didn't do it to the same scale, obviously, but you can see the different approach. I mean, both are effective, but they just give a different feel to the drawing. And that's it.